Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. These are my predictions for the upcoming 2023-24 season concerning the Premier League table, who do I think will win the league, who will get relegated, and who will finish in every position in between, as well as providing you with 3 bold predictions I have for the upcoming season and the winners of every single major European league, the Championship, and the Champions League. Those will come at the end of the video, but first off, here is my prediction for the 2023-24 Premier League table. We're starting off at the foot of the table, and in 20th place, I'm going with Sheffield United. I mean, where to begin with them? They haven't really done much to strengthen the squad upon promotion. They've released several of their stalwarts, including the likes of Ender Stevens and Billy Sharp, and have sold, or are on the verge of selling, 2 of their key players, if not their 2 key players, in the forms of Sander Berge to Burnley and Iliman Ndiaye to Marseille. So they don't really have that much star quality anymore. I think the season will go one of 2 ways. Either they will overachieve spectacularly against all the odds, like they did in 2019-20, when everyone predicted them to finish last and then they ended up coming in 9th, or they crash and burn, such as in 2020-21, when they finished dead last, like everyone had predicted them to finish the previous season. Many people are saying the latter, and I agree with them. I just don't see the star power in that squad. I don't see the quality that's going to keep their heads above the water. So I think it will be a swift return to the Championship for the Blades. Now, last season in 19th place, I had a bit of a shock 19th place prediction in the form of Southampton, which I not exactly got right, but did get right in terms of them going down. And my 19th place prediction this time around might be another shock. It's going to be Everton. Quite frankly, the club is in an absolute mess. They have no new signings to be really excited about. The likes of Yerry Mina, Andros Townsend and Connor Cody have all departed, and most importantly of all, the board and the owners are still in place despite quite clearly being absolutely clueless. If even someone like Sean Dyche can only just scrape survival last season with that squad at his disposal, and with now many key players having departed, the omens don't look good for them. They're bound to move into a new stadium in 2024, but I genuinely have zero confidence that it'll be a Premier League stadium. You can only be in so many relegation battles before the inevitable happens, and quite frankly, the club are sleepwalking towards relegation, and I think this season will be the year that the trapdoor finally opens. 18th place is another club who are in an absolute mess right now, and that is Wolves. I've said for years that it looks like the Wolves project is running out of steam, and now it well and truly looks that way. Julian Lopetegui, their one key asset, the person that could have pretty much guaranteed their survival, if anyone could have guaranteed their survival, has just left. In fact, the day before I'm recording this video was the day that his departure was confirmed, and Gary O'Neill is set to take charge. And yes, okay, O'Neill did a very good job last season at keeping Bournemouth above the drop when everyone expected them to go down, but with all the chaos going on at Molineux right now, I just can't see him replicating that feat. They've got so many issues on their plate right now with things like the Premier League sustainability rules and them potentially falling foul of those, meaning they've only signed 1 player so far, and even then it's the returning Matt Doherty on a free, having had his powers diminished after subpar spells at Spurs and Atletico Madrid. Players such as Pablo Sarabia, Mateus Cunha and Mateus Nunez look pretty disinterested and not really as though they want to actually be there. Club stalwarts like Ruben Neves, Raul Jimenez, Juan Moutinho, Adama Traore and of course Connor Cody have all gone, and as I mentioned, Lopetegui has just departed. It's a complete mess, and I think that can only mean one thing. You might have expected a different team to be in the relegation zone, but I've put them just outside it, and that is Luton. We all know the Luton story by now. They're the true underdogs of English football. They made it from non-league to the Premier League in 9 seasons on a low-end Championship budget, never mind a Premier League budget, and quite frankly, it might just be the story of the decade, just behind Leicester's title win in 2016. Their spirits are high, the momentum is well and truly with them. They made some pretty good signings, including the likes of Tahith Chong, Marvelous Sakamba, Issa Kabore. The overall hasn't been enormous in that pretty much none of their key players have departed. The fans and the stadium, of course, will be absolutely buoyant. And I think all of those factors together will mean that they managed to just about survive relegation this season. I think it'll be like a Huddersfield in 2017-18 situation where not many people give them a chance, but they defy all expectations despite their budget, despite all of the things that could work against them will actually work in their favour, and I think that'll mean that they survive relegation this season. In 16th place, I'm going to go for a repeat performance of Nottingham Forest, who, despite a busload of new arrivals last season, managed to stay up thanks to the wizardry of Morgan Gibbs-White towards the end of the campaign, the industry of Danilo, and most importantly of all, Steve Cooper still being in charge and managing to galvanise that squad right to the bitter end. Transfers have been much more muted this time around, but Anthony Elanga and Ola Aina are definitely very good additions. Elanga especially, I'm looking forward to seeing how well he does when he undoubtedly gets more game time at Forest. And no key players have departed apart from Keylor Navas and Renan Lodi, who are obviously going to depart anyway since they were loanees and have since moved on to Pasisnu in Lodi's case. So I don't think they were expected to stay, but apart from them, pretty much no other key players have gone as of the time of this recording. Their survival may well depend on Steve Cooper, and if he leaves or is sacked amidst an unfurling chaos, which given Forest's owner, don't rule that out, they could be in deep trouble. But as I see it right now, I think 16th isn't exactly the limit for them, but I think they just need a calm season, which I think they'll probably get. 15th place is going to be a bit of a drop off this season for Crystal Palace. It's their first season in 8.5 years without their talisman Wilfried Zaha, who has moved on to Galatasaray on a free, albeit Michael Olise and Eberechi Eze are still there. For now. They'll be supported by new arrival França, who looks a pretty promising talent arriving from Brazil, and Jefferson Lerma is a really smart addition in the middle of the park. But my big question is whether or not Roy Hodgson can still work his magic over the course of a full season. Yes, he managed to galvanise Palace right at the end of the campaign when he came in and guide them very comfortably to safety. In fact, they finished above Chelsea of all teams. But I don't see Hodgson being able to keep the troops going and challenge for the top half as Palace want to be. You know, they've been in the bottom half or between like 11th and 13th or whatever for most of the last few seasons, and they want to break that a barrier and go into the top half, but I just can't see it happening under Hodgson. I can only see a regression, sadly, and especially if either Olise or Eze leave. So, you know, it's going to be a bit of an interesting season for Palace, but I don't see it being a particularly good one. In 14th place, I've put Bournemouth. They've made a shock managerial appointment in Andoni Iraola, who came pretty much out of left field. I don't think anyone expected Gary O'Neill to be sacked, especially after he managed to guide them to safety. But the board clearly wanted a new direction. They clearly wanted upward momentum, which they didn't think O'Neill could provide. So in comes Iraola, the first foreign manager in their history, and with it, a brand new playing style, which of course the team will have to adapt to. They have suffered a big loss in the form of the aforementioned Lerma, who, as I mentioned, has gone to Crystal Palace, but they have brought in some very smart arrivals. Justin Kluivert in particular could be a wild card if he sparkles into life. And Miros Kerkez at left back could be another smart addition, especially if he stays in the Cherries' first team for the next few years. It could be a really wise investment. And I think that overall, the squad is actually not too bad. And with Iraola now in charge, it could go boom or bust, of course. It could very feasibly go bust and they could go straight back down. They will, of course, have to be wary of second season syndrome. But I think that he'll have enough nous to guide them to safety. They're not going to push really high up the table, but they're certainly not going to, you know, go down or anything like that, I don't think. The last promoted team to feature comes in at 13th, and that is Burnley. They stormed the championship last season, picking up over 100 points, and they look pretty set to consolidate in the Premier League and eventually push on even more. Vincent Kompany staying as manager is absolutely huge. He's confirmed he will at least stay for the season, having signed a new contract. He's overhauled Burnley completely. He's implemented his philosophies that he's taken on from all of the managers that he's worked under over the years, and he is ready to take on the Premier League. You know, he said he's the 21st best team in England last season rather than the best team in the Championship. So his sights and ambitions are so high. They are going to be held back slightly since Taylor Harwood-Bellis and Nathan Teller, two key loanees from them last season, won't be coming back to Turf Moor, but to compensate, they've signed a load of really good players, likes of Sander Berge, Dara O'Shea, Jakob Brun Larsen. James Trafford in goal could be a really smart move if he realises his potential, which he showcased at the Under-21 Euros over the summer, and Michael Obafemi from Southampton, as well as Bayer from Borussia Mönchengladbach. Now, those are all fantastic signings that will be really beneficial and will strengthen the Burnley first team, no doubt. This is definitely the season where they'll just make sure that they get themselves back in the Premier League and stay there. And then in 2024-25, they're going to push on, especially if Company stays for that season as well. In 12th place, I had this team originally in 16th, but based on the news that I've just seen in terms of them signing Harry Maguire and James Ward-Prowse, I've put West Ham a few spots higher than where I originally had them. Of course, those are the only two transfers that they will have made, provided they actually go through, but I do think that they will be pretty good additions. You know, Ward-Prowse will be a fantastic creator. We know how good he is at set pieces as well. And Harry Maguire, okay, he's had his troubles at Man United, well-documented troubles at Man United, but there is a player in there. I've been saying that for ages. There is absolutely a player in there. And hopefully making the step down to a slightly lesser team where there's less pressure on him will do wonders for him. Of course, to counteract this, you have the key departures. Most notably, of course, Declan Rice, their club captain, their star player, their talisman, the man who lifted the Conference League trophy in June, has now finally departed to Arsenal for £105 million. And as well as that, Scamacca experiment has failed. He's gone to Atalanta, and club stalwarts like Arthur Masuaku and Malanzini have also gone. Plus, they'll have the Europa League to contend with when their squad already doesn't look particularly strong in depth. And on top of all that, David Moyes, their manager, sadly looks like a dead man walking in spite of his Conference League success. And I think it will only be a matter of time before the owners decide that he isn't the man to take them forward and eventually pull the trigger on them. They have been able to cope with that kind of lack of squad depth and managerial insecurity last season, of course, because they went on to win the Conference League, obviously. So I don't think it'll be too detrimental for them. Plus, those signings will definitely bolster the squad a little bit. But they won't go into the top half, I don't think, just because the loss of Rice is so massive. But 12th for now, I think West Ham fans will take that, especially if they go deep in the Europa League as well. Now, the team I've put in 11th, I wouldn't actually be surprised if they have a massive drop-off this season, especially if their talisman ends up leaving. The team in question is Fulham, and the talisman in question is Alexander Mitrovic, who has pretty much gone public and said that he wants to leave Fulham for Saudi Arabia, which I'm really not surprised about at all. But given how important he was to the team last season, how much they missed him when he was banned for 8 matches after pushing a referee, it might not bode well if they can let him go. However, to counteract this, Marco Silva has decided that he will stay after rejecting approaches from Saudi Arabia. Mitrovic is still at the club for now, and they have also made a couple of decent signings. Calvin Bassey from Ajax could be very, very successful. And Raul Jimenez, okay, he's yet to discover his best form after suffering that horrendous skull fracture in 2021. But there is still a player in there, and if Mitrovic does stay, he will be a very good backup striker. Second season syndrome is definitely a thing, of course, and Fulham will absolutely be wary of that. But with the likes of Palhinha, Teta, Leno, and other key players looking set to stay, they should be wise enough and should have enough star quality to not only keep their heads above the water, but keep their mid-table finish, albeit I don't think it'll be a top half one. Speaking of the top half, and the first position in that top half, I think is going to go to Brentford. They had a phenomenal season last time out, banishing any fears of that second season syndrome with some quite frankly phenomenal displays. I mean, they did the double over Man City. They were the only team to do that in the entire season. But there are a few issues now with Brentford, of course. Losing David Raya is massive. He was one of their best players last season. Yes, Mark Flecken is a good replacement in goal, but losing Raya could still be pretty huge. And of course, most notably of all, they won't have Ivan Toney for the first 5 months of the season. The man who scored 20 goals for them last time out. So that could potentially backfire against them. Although, as the stat widely goes, they did win 4 and draw 1 of the 5 games that Toney missed last season. But on the flip side, most of their other key players, all of their other key players, in fact, barring Raya, are set to stick around, and they've made good signings such as the permanent capture of Kevin Schade and Nathan Collins from Wolves, who I think has a lot of potential and definitely will be able to realise that in a Brentford side that I think will play to his strengths. So I think with all of that in mind, they will slightly fall back from last season, but be absolutely nowhere near trouble, and if anything, will maintain their top half status. The team I put in 9th are another one of the shock success stories last season, but unlike Brentford, Brighton actually managed to get European football last time out for the first time in their entire history, which is testament to the incredible work that Tony Bloom and his recruitment team have done at the Amex Stadium. But the big question now is, can they replicate it again? Especially having lost 2, and certainly 1, of their key players in the form of Alexis McAllister going to Liverpool and Moises Caicedo pretty much guaranteed to join Chelsea at this point. I mean, he's openly stated he wants to leave, and I don't think Brighton will be able to hold out. However, João Pedro and Mahmoud Dahoud are good replacements, but for Bruggen will replace Robert Sanchez and probably actually be better than Sanchez in general. James Milner on a free is a really shrewd signing and will bring experience and European know-how to that Brighton squad. And the likes of Evan Ferguson, Enciso and Lewis Dunk look set to stay. With all that in mind, it's definitely possible that they could go on and potentially push for a Champions League spot or even maintain their Europa League status. But I'm not sure if the squad depth is enough to compete in the league and in Europe as well, especially with Levi Colwill having gone back to Chelsea. But they definitely won't have a massive drop-off. They'll sink a couple of places, or drop a couple of places, I think is the more appropriate verb to use, to 9th, but it won't be a terrible season, and I think most Brighton fans would be very happy with seeing their team playing in Europe and maintaining their top half status. A set of fans who won't be happy, however, are those for the team I've put in 8th, and that team is Chelsea. Quite frankly, what the hell is going on again at Stamford Bridge? They've sold an entire squad to compensate for the, 2 squads they bought last season, likes of Kai Havertz, Mason Mount, Azpilicueta, Mateo Kovacic, Christian Pulisic. I could go on and on and on, have all departed. And Nkunku, their brand new signing, who was going to probably bring the goals back to Chelsea, is out injured until December. Robert Sanchez isn't really an upgrade on Kepa. Nicholas Jackson, whilst potentially he has a lot of potential, but he's pretty inexperienced. And Levi Colwill, okay, he's back for good and has signed a new contract, but will he be enough to, make the Blues much stronger? They're already not terrible in defence last season. It was up front where they were the biggest issue, and their marquee signing striker, as I've mentioned, is now out until December. Admittedly, last time they weren't in Europe, 2016-17, they went on to storm the league title under Antonio Conte. And yes, Mauricio Pochettino is a very good managerial appointment who probably will manage to get the best out of this Chelsea team at some point. But they are in complete chaos and upheaval, and when you get rid of an entire squad of players, having bought a couple of squads in the previous season, there's so much upheaval, there's so much overturn of players that it just becomes too chaotic for them to cope with. And I genuinely think that they will be in serious trouble, because if they don't qualify for Europe, they'll be in serious trouble with FFP or Premier League sustainability rules. Can their players really cope with all that upheaval? If anyone can do it, it might well be Pochettino to guide them through it, but I don't see it happening this season. 8th. That means that I don't think the big 7, as I'm going to call them now, will actually be in the top 7 spots. And the team who's going to break into that and stay in it is Aston Villa. The transformation under Unai Emery has obviously been remarkable. They now look like an ambitious club who really are going places and have the bonus of Europa Conference League football and a European adventure for the first time in 13 years. Their defence now looks ridiculous. I mean, you've got Tyrone Mings, Diego Carlos, Ezri Konsa, and now Pau Torres as options at centre-back, which quite frankly is ridiculous. Ollie Watkins, Jacob Ramsey and new signing Moussa Diaby should have fantastic seasons, especially if Diaby can work his magic with Leon Bailey, who are of course clubmates at Bayer Leverkusen just a couple of seasons ago, and Yuri Tielemans is another smart addition on a free to bolster their options in the centre of the park. Having said all that though, there is the obvious caveat of will they be able to maintain their form from last season, considering they outperformed their XG on both counts, I think, both in terms of goals scored and goals conceded, and will Unai Emery actually be able to maintain that amazing run of form? I think they just about will. On the small caveat, only a small one, that they can keep Unai Emery at the helm and not see his nose tempted away by other jobs, potentially even Spain or Real Madrid should those options become available, and not suffer too many injuries. But for now, I genuinely think they're going to keep their European adventures going, and I think that provided they go deep in the Europa Conference League, I think they have the squad depth and quality to manage on those two fronts. So yeah, I think they're going to be ahead of Chelsea and finish in 7th and keep them out of European competition and put themselves back in it again. Now in 6th place, I'm going to put Spurs in. They're going to have a slight improvement on last season, considering they finished 8th and don't have European football, so they don't have extra distractions, but something doesn't quite feel right at Spurs right now. Maybe it's the will he, won't he Kane saga to Bayern, which has been going on for the last month. The fact that they don't have European football in the first place could also be a bit of a problem. And the new man in charge, Ange Postecoglou, who does seem really fired up for it and determined to prove himself, is still relatively untested in Europe's big leagues, but of course he has won trophies at pretty much everywhere he's been over the last decade, so that can only bode well for Spurs. Plus they made some good signings like James Maddison from Leicester. I think is a really good idea for them to add some creativity to their midfield. Mickey van der Veen, the goalkeeper Vicario, and Mano Solomon. I think Postecoglou will do good things with Spurs eventually, but with the Kane saga still going on, and I think he probably will end up going to Bayern Munich providing Daniel Levy accepts Bayern's bid, I think that 6th is probably the best I can give them. That means that I think the top 5 will be the exact same as last season, but the team I'm putting in 5th is not the same as the team who finished in 5th last season, and that team in question is Newcastle United. The feel-good factor is well and truly back on Tyneside. They have Champions League football for the first time in 20 years. No big players want to leave, apart from Alan Saint-Maximin, who's gone to Saudi Arabia, and they've made 3 fantastic signings in Sandro Tonali, Harvey Barnes, and Tino Livramento. Livramento provides them with more options at fullback and may well see Trippier move over to left-back, or maybe even himself move over to left-back. Harvey Barnes is a fantastic Alan Saint-Maximin replacement that should provide a lot of energy and dynamism down the left flank, and Sandro Tonali could well and truly free up Bruno Guimaraes and make him realise his full potential, whilst of course Tonali maintains a solid spot in the middle of the park. So they really do look set to only get better and better, especially since Eddie Howe has remained in charge and the squad of players as a whole is pretty good. That is counteracted though by the teams around them also strengthening, and I think that with that Champions League football distraction, I think that it's not exactly as though they're going to focus on the Champions League per se, but they might put a little bit of extra emphasis on that, and that could be to the very, very, very slight sacrifice of league form. But I don't think any Newcastle fan will be too disappointed with 5th. That means that I think Newcastle are going to switch places with Liverpool, who are going to be back in the Champions League for 2024-25. The only issue that I have with Liverpool is that it's not a midfield evolution like they needed, it's actually been a revolution. Now, 5 midfield players have gone out the door, including captain Jordan Henderson, who has basically decided to betray all of his morals and go to Saudi Arabia, and Fabinho, as well as the likes of Naby Keita, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, and James Milner, plus Fabio Carvalho going on loan to RB Leipzig. And only 2, as of the time of this recording, have come in, namely Alexis McAllister and Dominic Szoboszlai, albeit Romeo Lavia probably will join them at some point. But as of the time of recording, they don't really have a recognised defensive midfielder, barring Stefan Bajcetic, who is only 19, and indeed Romeo Lavia is also only 19, so they are pinning a lot of hopes on 2 relatively inexperienced players, albeit 2 very talented players, it must be stressed. The defence should definitely improve, especially with Trent Alexander-Arnold's return to form at the end of last season, and the attack still looks completely deadly, but have they done enough in the transfer market, and how crucial will Henderson's loss, and indeed playing on Thursday nights in the Europa League, prove to be? I don't think it'll be too detrimental, but I think a title challenge is, sadly for them, a little bit of a way off for the time being, but they'll definitely find themselves back in the Champions League for sure. So the top 3 are going to be the exact same, and the team I put in 3rd are also the team who finished in 3rd last season, and that is Manchester United. The Erik ten Hag revolution is well and truly a go. He's managed to get them back into the Champions League and has the added bonus of winning them their first trophy in 6 years in the form of the Carabao Cup. So he's pretty much done what was hoped for and maybe even expected of him in his first season. He's had that transitional season, and now he really has to knuckle down and get United back to where they want to be. The overhaul in goal is also well and truly complete, with David De Gea now finally out the door, and Andre Onana, of course, who worked under Erik ten Hag at Ajax, now through the door. Plus Mason Mount and Rasmus Højlund, who I do think is a little bit overpriced at £72 million, but does have a lot of potential in fairness, also coming in. And adding those players to the squad United already have could mean big things ahead. They definitely have enough quality to compete in both the Champions League and the league, and I really do think that they'll have a massive improvement in terms of the points total that they have come the end of the campaign from last season. They definitely won't win the league, I think. They'll definitely come very close, and Erik ten Hag will have a massively improved second season, provided of course he can iron out the mistakes that saw them thrashed by the likes of Man City, Brentford, and most notably of all, Liverpool. But for now, I think that third it's going to be where I think a lot of United fans might expect them to finish, maybe second or third, around that area, but it definitely will be a much improved season and a much more improved third place compared to last. So that means I think the top two are going to be Arsenal and Manchester City, and you have so many arguments in favour of both of these teams. You have Arsenal having now the know-how of competing in a title challenge, having been on top of the table for the best part of 250 days last season and only falling short of the final hurdle, and now having made some amazing additions with the likes of Jurriën Timber and most notably of all Declan Rice, who could finally be that Patrick Vieira figure in the centre of the park that they have been crying out for years. Plus they haven't lost any of their key players as well and have Champions League football back in their sights. Or you have Manchester City, who come into this campaign having won a treble and will look to win every single trophy on offer to them, of course, buying the Community Shield, which they lost to Arsenal the other day, and have bolstered their squad with Mateo Kovacic and Josko Gvardiol over the summer, and of course still have the likes of Bernardo Silva, Kyle Walker, who both accept to stay, Erling Haaland, who will definitely hope to improve on a ridiculous debut season, Phil Foden looking set to play through the middle, and no other really key players barring Ilkay Gundogan. Riyad Mahrez is always going to leave anyway, so it makes sense. But apart from Ilkay Gundogan, no other key players have departed. And having gone back and forth between the two for a little bit of time, I think it's going to be Arsenal in second. So Manchester City are going to do what no club in English football has ever done and win 4 league titles on the spit. Success seems inevitable really for Man City. Whether or not they'll go all the way in the Champions League again, I'm not quite sure. But it does seem like an inevitability for them to win the league this season, and certainly at least to win a trophy of some description. And they are made for league titles. They're made for league seasons. You know, that how they ended last season was ridiculous. They won like 12 games in a row to just barnstorm their way past Arsenal, who fumbled the bag at the last minute. And whilst I think it will be very, very, very close between these two, much closer than last season, despite how close last season was, City still have that know-how. They still have that quality about them, and most importantly of all, that hunger and desire to just keep on winning, and keep on winning even more than they've already won. So with all that in mind, Arsenal are just going to be behind Man City, and City are going to make Premier League and indeed English history. Now on to my final 2 segments for this video, and you'll be pleased to know that they will be a lot shorter. But the second one is my 3 bold predictions for the upcoming campaign. The first of which is that I think the top 3 will be separated by no more than 5 points. And what's more, to add to this, I think Arsenal and Man City are going to get more than 90 points apiece. So United will be in the high 80s and Man City and Arsenal probably in the low 90s. I think the standard of those teams is so high right now and so far away from the rest of the league, with Arsenal determined to win the league and finally get one over Man City, and of course Man United looking to re-establish themselves at the apex, at the pinnacle of the English game, whilst Man City are looking to keep themselves there. And I think that all of those factors taken into account will mean that this will be one of the most thrilling title races that we have seen in a very long time. The second one I'm going to go with is that both Bukayo Saka and Gabriel Martinelli will score more than 20 goals each in the league. Now, this isn't exactly unfeasible because we've seen it happen before with the likes of Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane winning the Golden Boots shared with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in 2018-19, primarily playing in off the wing and both scoring more than 20 goals apiece. And with the creativity that Arsenal have, with the additions of the likes of Declan Rice and Kai Havertz, plus Gabriel Jesus potentially acting as a false 9 as well as Leandro Trossard, plus Kai Havertz can play there as well, and Martin Odegaard still continuing to pull the strings in midfield, I think there'll be so many chances for them over the course of the season. They look set to only get better and better. As I say, it's not unfeasible for 2 wingers to score 20 plus league goals for a team in a single season in the league. And if any 2 pairings are going to do it this season, or any pairing of wingers rather, that are going to do it this season, I think it's going to be Saka and Martinelli. My third and final bold prediction is that more managers will leave their jobs than last season. We already had 2 clubs last season who went through 2 separate managerial sackings in the forms of Southampton and Chelsea, and look how both of those clubs turned out in terms of their respective fortunes. But we've already had one manager leave their post. I think this season it'll just be a continuous trend of managers leaving their posts, because we've got so many erratic owners and so many clubs in difficult situation, and also with the ever-growing importance of Premier League survival, with the enormous money involved in staying in the Premier League through broadcast revenue and sponsorship payments and stuff like that, and the dip in revenue when you go into the Championship and how desperate clubs will be to stave off relegation. I think there will be more managerial sackings this season compared to last, and that is saying something, but I don't think it's unfeasible at all considering how much is at stake. And now finally, I'm going to whiz through this bit as fast as I can. I'm going to give my very quick predictions as to who I think will win the major European leagues, the Championship and the Champions League. For Ligue 1, I'm going to go with PSG, because obviously I'm going to go with PSG. Why would you go with anyone else, especially with their closest competitors, RC Lens, having sold many of their key players. And yes, of course, the Kylian Mbappe saga is still ongoing at PSG, but it is PSG. Of course, they're going to win the league. For Germany, I'm going to go with Bayern Munich because, again, it makes sense. Dortmund have lost Jude Bellingham, and Bayern are still Bayern Munich at the end of the day. And yes, they only just won the league last season because of a Dortmund bottle job, but they'll be wiser now. They have more competent directors in place, and I think that will basically mean that they steamroll the league once again. In Serie A, arguably the most difficult league to predict, I'm going to go with Napoli to retain their title, but only if they can keep Victor Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia Kvaratskhelia. Of course, they've lost their star defender Kim Min-jae to Bayern Munich, and AC Milan will definitely run them close, especially with the very good signings like to Christian Pulisic and Ruben Loftus-Cheek that they have made. And if they do lose those two star players, Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia, I think AC Milan might just pip them. But for now, as of the time of this recording, they're both still there, so I think Napoli are going to win it again. And in La Liga, I just can't let past Real Madrid. I just can't. Like, that midfield is ridiculous. You've got Bellingham, Valverde, Kroos, Modric, Camavinga and Tchouaméni. That's just a cheat code. There is absolutely no way that Real Madrid won't win the league this season, I don't think. And if they don't win the league, then that's a pretty damning indictment on them. For the Championship, as boring as it is, I'm just going to go with Leicester because their squad is still very good in spite of the departures that they've had, and they brought in some good players like Connor Cody and Harry Winks most notably, and Stefan Mavidi from Montpellier. So I think that they'll be fine. They'll be able to get themselves back up to the Premier League, especially with the benefits of parachute payments and a brand new manager looking to implement new ideas in the form of Enzo Maresca, who I think will do a pretty decent job. I mean, they'll obviously do a decent job, will get Leicester back up, but that is the minimum expectation, I think, at the King Power Stadium, and they will achieve it. And for the Champions League, I don't think Man City are going to retain it. I think it's going to be Real Madrid who are going to win their 15th Champions League title. I think it might well be a final of Man City versus Real Madrid, provided they aren't drawn against each other in prior rounds, of course. But Real Madrid will want to get one over the citizens, especially after they were thrashed and humbled 4-0 in the second leg last season. So I think that with the additions that they've made and the squad power that they already have, I can't see Real Madrid not winning at the very least La Liga, and I think I can definitely see them winning the Champions League to boot. And that just wraps up today's video looking at my predictions for the upcoming 2023-24 season. If you enjoyed this video, of course, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let me know what you think of my predictions, as well as giving me your own, of course, down in the comments section below. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you then.